So with writing Breathe In, Bleed Out, I knew that I wanted to have a protagonist who was already kind of haunted and traumatized at the start of the story, because I knew I was sending her to a healing retreat. So she needed to have something that she was healing from. And so when we meet her, she's emerging from this snowy wilderness trip that she went on with her fiance, and she's dragging her dead fiance out of the wilderness, and we don't know what happened or why or how. And that remains a central mystery through the narrative, as Hannah is really having a rough go of it, a year later, trying to just focus on work as a medical intern, and is leaning on prescription medication and pushing her friends away. She's coping in all the wrong ways, until her friend invites her to this exclusive retreat, and the group of friends goes off to hopefully find healing. But unfortunately, it's a horror novel, so not much. I really approached it as Hannah is a haunted character. She's haunted by her trauma, but because it's a horror story, I could make that very literal. And so in the opening chapters of the book, we're seeing that she's having visions of her dead fiance. He's speaking to her, he's appearing at work and in her personal life in these ways that, again, coming back to that balance of psychological versus supernatural, like it's something that she really cannot get rid of, she cannot get past. And so that was kind of the way that I thought of it, was okay, this is going to be a story about a haunted character entering into a slasher narrative, and that kind of manifestation of her trauma felt appropriate for the genre elements, to then discover that there might be some kind of supernatural element at play in the desert as well. And through her, we second guess and doubt everything, because she is an unreliable narrator from chapter one, and that adds an extra element of mystery to it. The joys of writing slashers is playing with the familiar tropes, and that includes kind of character archetypes. And so Hannah and her friend group, like, they're kind of updates on those familiar 80s tropes of, like, the dumb jock in this case is like an ad sales bro, and the like bitchy mean girl is, instead of like a cheerleader, she's a yogi. And the stoner is like a EDM DJ. So I really looked at those familiar tropes and said, okay, what's the modern version of these characters, and how can I update them and have fun with them, and also have them be kind of estranged, because the book kind of deals with those, like, why are these people my friends again kind of vibe. So I definitely have seen a lot of readers kind of like loving and then also loving to hate some of the characters, which is also part of the fun. And Joshua Tree just felt like the most organic setting. These characters come from LA, and right now, like, Joshua Tree is where people from LA go to retreats, and there's all of the kind of commodified spirituality shops there. And I decided to make this retreat, rather than a really expensive, upscale, fancy experience, it is a primitive, scaled down, tech-free. You're sleeping on, like, basically on the dirt in yurts, because I wanted that to add to the kind of like primal survivalism of the story. And it's led by this man named Guru Pax, who's this mysterious figure who keeps talking about how the spirits are going to connect with everybody here. So again, tapping into that, like, there's an energy vortex, and is it supernatural? And then also getting to play with the mining history of Joshua Tree, because there were these abandoned gold mines in the area, and there is a legend, which I love playing with in slasher narratives like Candy Cane. And in this case, it's an old-timey gold miner named Waylon Barlow, who may or may not be haunting the land. So it was really fun, again, to take all of the slasher elements and kind of just twist them and play with them and put them all into one story like that. I like to start with the kind of surface level stereotypes, right? Which make it easy to like poke fun and satirize at the start of the story, and everybody knows somebody like all of these characters. But part of my goal as a writer, especially in the novel space, is I can go deeper with these characters. I can give them their own chapters, and I love to kind of peel back the layers of someone who at first blush seems like you want to write them off, or you really don't like them. But slowly, I like to show you different shades so that, okay, maybe I understand why they are the way that they are. But then again, because it's a slasher, just because they've been humanized does not mean that they all get to survive. And I do like to play with, I mentioned Freddy Krueger earlier, and I love the way that Freddy kills with specificity. He's not somebody who just stabs every victim to death. He taps into your worst fears. He turns your kind of identity against you. And for me, writing slashers, that's part of the fun, is to make the kills feel very, very personal and extremely elaborate. I have a lot of comparisons to the Final Destination franchise when people read my books, because these death scenes are big set pieces that use multiple props and are very elaborate, and that's part of the fun for me on the page as well. But approaching a slasher, especially this one, I started with the location of the spiritual wellness retreat because I knew, okay, I'm going to have fun with the kills in this particular setting, because I knew we've got yoga studios and sound baths and hot springs. And so I really, the first tentpole moments that I figured out were those murder set pieces, because it's innate to what people come to this subgenre for. And I kind of reverse engineered the characters to fit those kills. I thought about, okay, what's the kind of character that I can kind of build into this to make it feel like this is kind of a personal punishment to a certain degree. And that for me is part of the fun of kind of reverse engineering the story from what is the promise of this premise? Again, like a slasher at a wellness retreat, like the kills better be really specific and fun, and then make sure that those characters kind of fit into each of those big set pieces.